welcome to your deep dive. Today we're going deep on the state of modern masculinity. It's a topic you flagged as really important, and we've got a ton of sources here, a lot to unpack. Looks like you're trying to understand how all the societal shifts are impacting men, especially in relationships and when it comes to leadership.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
So let's jump right in.
Sounds good.
I'm seeing some big themes already emerging from the material you've shared. The decline of the traditional family, the impact of the media, the rise of that whole red pill movement. It seems like you're trying to connect the dots and understand what it all means for men today.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is how all these themes kind of intertwine. You can't really talk about masculinity today without looking at the massive societal changes over the past few decades, the sexual revolution, feminism, the shift towards more egalitarian society. All of those have had a profound impact on traditional male roles and expectations.
Totally. And your sources dive deep into those changes. For example, there's a lot of discussion about the decline of marriage and the rise of single-parent households. One author even calls it a societal earthquake, saying this father gap has serious consequences, especially for boys.
Right. And it's not just speculation. The sources highlight some pretty hard-hitting statistics. Over 40% of children in the U.S. are now born to unmarried mothers. It's a massive jump from just a few decades ago, and it's definitely having a ripple effect across society.
Yeah, it's like a domino effect almost. These sources really make a point that this lack of fathers in the picture impacts boys in almost every area of their lives. Their development, their sense of purpose, even their performance in school, and their ability to form healthy relationships later on.
Absolutely. And one of the sources draws a really compelling comparison between the decline of fatherhood in the Roman Empire and what we're seeing today.
Oh, wow.
It really makes you think, could that be where we're headed to?
That's a crazy thought.
It is, isn't it?
That's a thought-provoking parallel. That source really drives home the point that as the traditional family structure in Rome crumbled, so did their social order, and eventually even their power. Makes you wonder if strong families are really the foundation of a strong society,
Definitely something to consider. And speaking of history, you also highlighted material about the post-World War II era, which shed some light on this issue as well.
Right. That source talks about how returning soldiers often struggled to adjust to civilian life. Many turned to alcohol or, even abandoned their families. It's heartbreaking, really. And it created a generation of fatherless boys, who in turn grew up to be the men of the 60s and 70s, often rebelling against authority and rejecting traditional values.
Yeah, it's a tragic cycle, and it's hard not to wonder if we're seeing a similar pattern play out today, generations later.
It's a scary thought.
It is. And this brings us to another significant theme you've highlighted, the way the education system might be failing boys.
Right. There's a lot in here about declining male graduation rates, the impact of those A.D.H.D diagnoses on boys, even comparisons to historical models like the Prussian system. It's like you're trying to get to the bottom of how modern education is impacting boys differently than girls.
Yeah, for sure. And some of the sources even argue that the shift away from traditional teaching methods and, that big focus on emotional intelligence might actually be putting boys at a disadvantage. What do you think about that?
It's definitely interesting, and it makes you think. These sources argue that boys who often are more competitive and, prone to risk-taking, they may not thrive in learning environments that emphasize collaboration and emotional expression as much. It almost seems like they're asking, are we neglecting boys' natural tendencies instead of harnessing them?
It's a valid question, and it's definitely backed up by some pretty stark statistics. In the 1960s, men made up nearly 60% of college graduates. Today, that number has flipped, with boys accounting for just 40%. That's a dramatic shift. It makes you wonder if the education system is really serving their needs.
Right, and there's a powerful anecdote in one of the sources that really stuck with me. A mother shares the story of her son, who was diagnosed with A.D.H.D after his school got rid of recess and competitive sports. Her point was that his natural energy and need to move were pathologized. He was basically medicated into submission.
Wow, that's pretty intense.
It is.
And, some sources even go as far as to compare the modern system to historical models like the Prussian system, which really focused on, discipline, rigor, and competition.
Right. And they argue that those systems produced some of history's most influential thinkers because they challenged boys and encouraged them to push their limits.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast to how we approach education today, that's for sure.
It really is. And speaking of stark contrasts, let's move on to another fascinating theme you've highlighted. This is where things get really interesting. The rise of the red pill movement.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It seems like you're really digging into its critiques of modern dating dynamics, the concept of hypergamy, and the lasting effects of the sexual revolution.
Right.
It feels like you're trying to understand why this movement has gained so much traction,
Ugh.
especially among men who feel disillusioned with modern relationships.
Definitely.
One of the sources even describes it as like a direct response to the perceived failures of modern feminism and the confusion men feel about their role in today's dating world.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's like men are looking for answers and explanations in a world where the old rules don't seem to apply anymore.
Exactly. And the red pill, for better or worse, offers them a framework for understanding what they're seeing, particularly when it comes to, the concept of hypergamy.
Right, that idea that women are naturally drawn to men who possess higher status. I can see how that would be a tough pill to swallow, so to speak.
Yeah.
But some men feel it explains why they're struggling in the dating world.
I get it. It's a controversial theory, for sure, but one that resonates with a lot of men. And, that same source also argues that the sexual revolution, while liberating in many ways, it kind of created a commitment vacuum where those traditional relationship expectations were completely turned upside down.
Yeah, like all the rules were thrown out the window.
Exactly.
And without those clear expectations, it can feel like a free-for-all out there,
Definitely.
leaving a lot of men feeling lost and uncertain about how to navigate the modern dating landscape.
Yeah, for sure. It's a whole new world out there, and the rules of the game have definitely changed.
It's a jungle out there.
It is, yeah. And it's not just the dating scene that's in flux, Your sources also dive into the impact of no-fault divorce laws. They argue that they've kind of tipped the scales in a way that often leaves men feeling disadvantaged.
That's a perspective you don't hear very often. What are the sources saying specifically?
Well, they argue that these laws have created a system where men often face huge financial burdens in divorce settlements and can even lose custody of their children, even when they've been actively involved in raising them.
Right.
It's a sensitive topic for sure, but one that clearly resonates with you since you've highlighted these sections.
It makes sense that this would contribute to the frustration and the sense of unfairness that a lot of men are feeling these days. It's like they're playing by a set of rules that are stacked against them,
Exactly. And it's not just societal factors at play here either. Your sources also delve into the biological underpinnings of masculinity, with a particular focus on the role of testosterone. One even proposes a hormonal hierarchy theory.
Okay, now that sounds intriguing. What is that all about?
Well, it goes beyond just the obvious physical effects of testosterone. It suggests that testosterone also influences those key personality traits, like assertiveness, competitiveness, and resilience, which have traditionally been associated with leadership roles.
So are they saying that men are biologically predisposed to be leaders?
That's the gist of it, yeah. The source even uses historical figures like Winston Churchill and Alexander the Great as examples of how these testosterone-driven traits have shaped history.
Interesting. It makes you think about that whole nature versus nurture debate. If men are biologically wired for leadership, then how does that square with the idea that leadership is a social construct?
Right. That's the million-dollar question. And it's something that your sources grapple with as well. It seems like you're really trying to understand that interplay between biology and those societal influences, when it comes to masculinity.
That's like trying to untangle a really complicated knot.
Yeah, it is. But speaking of leadership, you've also highlighted a lot of material about the importance of those positive male role models. It seems like you're concerned about the messages boys are receiving about, what it means to be a man in today's world.
That's true. I'm seeing a lot here about the lack of strong male role models in the media and how that impacts boys' self-esteem. The sources also talk about the need for mentors and father figures, which kind of brings us back to what we were discussing earlier about that whole father gap.
It's all connected. One source even talks about the what they call the male incompetence trope that's so common in movies and TV shows these days.
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
The bumbling dad who can't do anything right, or that husband who's constantly being outsmarted by his wife.
Right, it's like they're making men the butt of the joke all the time.
Exactly, and the source argues that these portrayals can have a real impact on how men see themselves. And how women see men,
Right.
It's like they're feeding into this narrative that men are just, incompetent or incapable.
And they can't be good for anyone.
Not at all. That's why those sources emphasize the importance of those real life role models. Men who embody strength, responsibility, and purpose. Men who can, actually show boys what it truly means to be a good man.
It makes you wonder if that's part of the reason why those mentoring programs like Big Brothers Big Sisters are so impactful. They provide boys with that one-on-one mentorship and guidance from, a positive male figure.
Yeah, for sure. Those programs can be real game changers for boys who are lacking those positive male influences in their lives. It's
Yeah.
about showing them a different path, a different way of being.
Yeah, like giving them a blueprint for manhood.
Exactly. And speaking of blueprints, you've also flagged a lot of material about male self-improvement. It seems like you're looking for those concrete steps that men can take to better themselves in their lives.
True. I'm really interested in that link between self-improvement and success, particularly in dating and relationships. Sources talk about strategies for like personal growth, fitness, career advancement, even emotional resilience.
Yeah, one source argues that self-improvement is like the foundation for a successful dating strategy. The idea is that men who invest in their physical fitness, their careers, and their emotional well-being are just naturally more attractive to women.
Makes sense. Because those qualities signal like strength, ambition, and stability, right?
Precisely. Those are the traits that, most women find appealing in a partner. And the source goes on to provide some specific strategies for achieving those goals, like hit the gym, learn a new skill, build a successful career. It's all about becoming the best version of yourself, both for yourself and for the people you want to attract.
It's about taking control of your own destiny.
Exactly. And another source takes a more philosophical approach, focusing on those traditional self-improvement methods like Stoicism.
Oh, interesting. I've heard of Stoicism, but I'm curious to hear more about how it relates to masculinity.
Well, the source argues that Stoicism, with its emphasis on self-control, resilience, and virtue, it offers a timeless framework for men to navigate all those challenges of life. It's about, controlling your emotions, accepting what you can't change, and focusing on living a virtuous life.
Yeah, it's intense.
In a way, it is. And the source connects Stoicism to the idea of male leadership, arguing that self-mastery is the foundation for, effective leadership. If you can't control yourself, how can you expect to lead others?
That's a good point.
Right. And it ties into another key theme you've highlighted, the role of male leadership in society.
Yeah, there's a lot here about that. You've provided sources that cover everything from the like biological imperative for male leadership to historical examples of those great male leaders. It seems like you're really trying to grapple with this question of why male leadership is so important and, how it's being undermined in today's world.
Yeah, it's a big question for sure. One source argues that men are like biologically wired for leadership. Pointing back to that hormonal hierarchy theory we talked about earlier, they use examples like Winston Churchill and Julius Caesar to illustrate how those testosterone-driven traits have shaped the course of history.
It's hard to argue with those examples.
It is, isn't it? And another source tackles this idea of the what they call the leadership paradox, where society demands male leadership, but then criticizes the very qualities that, make men effective leaders.
Oh, interesting. It's like a double standard.
Exactly. Men are expected to be strong and decisive, but then they're labeled as toxic or aggressive when they actually display those traits. It's like a no-win situation.
It sounds incredibly frustrating.
It is. It is. And that's why your sources emphasize the importance of men, stepping up and reclaiming those leadership roles, both in their personal lives and in society as a whole.
So it's about leading by example.
Absolutely. And it's about setting a standard for, what healthy masculinity actually looks like.
Right. And speaking of healthy masculinity, you've also included a lot of material about the impact of, male friendships and support networks.
Yeah.
It seems like you're interested in exploring that importance of male bonding and how it's being affected by all those modern trends.
For sure. One source talks about what they call the brotherhood deficit.
Oh, interesting.
It's this idea that men are increasingly isolated and lacking those deep, meaningful connections that come from strong male friendships.
Well, it's not just about like having buddies to hang out with. It's about having those deeper connections.
Exactly. And that source blames things like the decline of those traditional male spaces, the rise of social media, and even that negative portrayal of male friendships in the media for this brotherhood deficit.
You're right. You think about how many movies and TV shows depict male friendships as just like shallow or competitive. It's rarely about genuine support and connection.
Exactly. It's like they're trying to tell us that men can't be, true friends. But your sources argue otherwise. They point to the historical significance of male support networks, using examples like the Freemasons and the Knights Templar.
Those are fascinating examples. What was it about those groups that made them so, successful?
Well, they provided men with a sense of belonging, purpose, and community. They offered structure and accountability, which, as we discussed earlier, can be incredibly valuable, especially in a world where those traditional social structures are kind of breaking down.
Right, right. So how do those historical examples translate to today's world? Are there any, modern equivalents to those groups?
Another source you've got here points to the rise of those men's groups, like the Art of Manliness and other similar organizations that are focused on, reclaiming that traditional masculinity.
Interesting. Those groups seem to be gaining a lot of traction lately.
Yeah, it's no coincidence. The source suggests they're filling a void, providing men with a sense of community and purpose that's often missing in their lives these days. It's like they're rediscovering the power of brotherhood.
It's amazing how all these themes keep coming back to connection. We've talked about fatherhood, education, relationships, friendships, support networks. It all seems interconnected.
It is. It all points to the fact that men are social creatures. We need connection, we need purpose, we need a sense of belonging.
And when those needs aren't met, that's when we start to see problems.
Exactly. And that brings us to another crucial theme you've highlighted, the impact of, male-female relationships on men's overall well-being.
Yeah, that's a big one. It looks like you're really trying to understand all the complexities of the modern dating scene and how men can actually navigate it successfully.
Right. You've included sources that explore everything from the dynamics of attraction to the challenges of online dating to the role of male leadership in shaping healthy relationships. It's like you're trying to decode the secrets of successful relationships.
It can definitely feel like a puzzle sometimes, especially with the rise of, dating apps and social media. It feels like the rules of the game have completely changed.
Yeah, you're right. One source argues that these platforms have they've intensified the effects of hypergamy. That concept we discussed earlier about women being drawn to men of higher status.
Right. So how do men even begin to compete in that kind of environment?
Well, that same source emphasizes the importance of self-improvement. It's about leveling up your game, so to speak, becoming the best version of yourself so that you can attract the kind of partner you want.
So it's about investing in yourself before you can expect anyone else to invest in you.
Exactly. And another source takes a more traditional approach, advocating for a return to clearly defined gender roles in relationships.
Interesting. What are they advocating for specifically?
Well, they argue that when men take on that traditional leadership role, providing and protecting, it creates a sense of security and stability that benefits both partners. It's a view that, challenges a lot of those modern relationship norms, but one that some people find appealing.
Makes you think. It definitely makes you think about the different ways relationships can work.
Exactly. And that's that's the beauty of exploring all these different perspectives. It's about finding what works for you and your partner, regardless of, what society might dictate.
One thing that keeps coming up in these sources is this idea that men are being told they need to be more emotionally expressive, more vulnerable, but at the same time, they're being criticized for being, too aggressive or assertive. It's kind of a mixed message.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. Your sources refer to this as the masculine paradox. Men are caught in this double bind where they're told to be sensitive and in touch with their feelings, but then they're punished for expressing those feelings in ways that are deemed inappropriate.
So they're damned if they do and damned if they don't.
Exactly. And this, this paradox creates a lot of confusion and frustration for men. They're getting mixed signals about what it really means to be a man in today's world.
It's like they're trying to fit into a box that keeps changing shape.
That's a great analogy, and it's why it's so important to have those, clear, consistent messages about masculinity, messages that affirm the value of strength, courage, and responsibility without demonizing those qualities or suggesting that men need to suppress their natural instincts.
So it's about finding that balance, that sweet spot where men can be both strong and sensitive, assertive, and compassionate.
Absolutely. And speaking of messages, you've also highlighted a lot about how the media portrays men, particularly in movies and TV shows.
It's true. So many male characters these days are either portrayed as bumbling idiots or, heartless villains It's like there's no middle ground.
Yeah, and your sources argue that these portrayals are incredibly damaging. They're shaping the way men see themselves and the way women see men. They're perpetuating those negative stereotypes that can have, real world
It's
consequences.
creating this self-fulfilling prophecy where men start to believe those stereotypes and then act accordingly.
Exactly. One of your sources even uses the term media emasculation cycle to describe this phenomenon. It's a vicious cycle, and it's hard to break.
So what can we do about it?
Well, the sources suggest that we need to be more critical of, the media we consume. We need to seek out those alternative narratives that offer a more balanced and nuanced view of masculinity.
So it's not about like boycotting all media, but about being more discerning
Yeah.
about what we choose to watch and listen to.
Exactly. And speaking of seeking out those alternative narratives, another theme that's come up repeatedly is that decline of traditional male spaces.
Right. There's a lot in here about that. There's a lot of discussion about how the loss of these spaces, like, men's clubs, fraternities, even just those informal gatherings, is contributing to the isolation and loneliness that a lot of men are feeling these days.
Yeah, those spaces used to provide men with a sense of belonging, purpose, and camaraderie. It's where they learned how to be men, how to interact with each other, how to navigate those challenges of life.
It's like they've lost their tribe.
Exactly, and the sources argue that we need to create new spaces, both physical and virtual, where men can connect and support each other.
So are they suggesting we like try to recreate those old school men's clubs?
Not necessarily. They're more focused on, the principles behind those spaces.
Yeah.
Creating environments where men can be themselves, where they can, forge those strong bonds with other men, and where they can feel a sense of purpose.
So it's about finding that sense of brotherhood again, but in a way that's relevant to the modern world.
Exactly. And one interesting example that comes up is that the rise of the man cave.
Oh yeah, I've heard of those. Are they seen as a positive development?
It's a bit of a mixed bag. The source acknowledges that, man caves can provide a temporary escape from the pressures of the world.
Like sanctuary, where a
Right.
man can just be himself without judgment.
Right, but the source also cautions that, man caves can become a symbol of isolation if men retreat into them too much.
So beneficial in moderation. But they shouldn't become a man's entire world.
That's the idea. It's about finding that balance.
It's interesting how so many of these sources keep pointing back to history for answers.
You're right. They draw inspiration from, ancient Sparta, the Roman Empire, even those medieval guilds, to understand how men thrived in the past.
It's like they're searching for that lost blueprint for masculinity.
Exactly, and they argue that we can learn a lot from those historical models. They emphasize discipline, purpose, and brotherhood, values that are often lacking in the modern world.
So it's not about trying to go back in time, but about understanding what worked in the past and applying those principles to today.
Exactly. And another historical element that comes up is that role of religion in shaping masculinity.
Right. There's a lot here about that. You've highlighted sections that explore the connection between, faith and purpose, the importance of those religious rituals for men, and that decline of religious belief in modern society. It seems like you're really wrestling with this question of whether religion is a necessary component of healthy masculinity.
It's a question that a lot of men grapple with, yeah. One source argues that religion provides men with a sense of meaning and purpose that's often missing in the secular world.
Right. So it's about having something larger than yourself to believe in.
Exactly. And that source suggests that those religious rituals, like prayer and communal worship, they offer men a way to connect with something transcendent, something that gives their lives meaning.
But what about men who aren't religious? Are they doomed to live meaningless lives?
Not at all. Your sources acknowledge that there are other paths to finding meaning and purpose. It could be, pursuing a passion, connecting with nature, serving your community, anything that gives you that sense of transcendence.
So it's about finding that thing that lights you up, that makes you feel alive.
Exactly. And it's about, contributing to something larger than yourself, whether that's your family, your community, or even, the world.
One thing that really stands out to me from all these sources is this emphasis on action.
You're right. It's not enough to simply understand the problems facing men today. We need to actually, take action to solve them.
Whether that's through self-improvement, building stronger relationships, advocating for change in our communities, or just, being better men in our everyday lives.
Exactly. It's about taking ownership of our lives and our masculinity, and being the change we want to see in the world.
Yeah, it really does feel like a call to action, doesn't it? It's not enough to just sit around and talk about these issues. We need to actually, do something about them.
Absolutely. And that sense of urgency really comes through in the material you've provided. There's a lot of talk about this feeling that traditional masculinity is under attack, that men are being demonized just for being men.
Right. One of the sources even goes so far as to call it a war on masculinity, which, that sounds pretty intense.
Yeah, it's a strong statement for sure, and I think it reflects the frustration that a lot of men are feeling. They're being told that everything about their nature is inherently toxic or problematic. It's like they can't win.
Right, but your sources push back against that narrative, right? They argue that masculinity in its true form is actually a force for good in the world.
Exactly. They point to countless examples of men throughout history who've embodied strength, courage, leadership, making incredible contributions to society. They argue that it's not masculinity itself that's the problem. It's those, those distorted, unhealthy versions of masculinity that we often see in the media and that are promoted by certain ideologies.
Right, so it's about separating the good from the bad, recognizing that true masculinity is about, protecting the weak, providing for your family, leading with integrity.
Exactly. Those are qualities that have always been valued, and they're just as important today as they were in the past. Maybe even more so, given all the challenges we're facing as a society.
Right, it's like your sources are saying we need to reclaim those values, both for the sake of individual man and for the sake of, society as a whole.
They make a strong case for that. They argue that when men are strong, families are strong, communities are strong, and ultimately society is stronger.
It's like you can't build a strong house on a weak foundation.
Right.
And another point that keeps coming up is this idea of taking responsibility, not just for ourselves, but for the world around us.
Right. It's about men stepping up and owning their lives, their choices, their actions. It's about rejecting that victim mentality and embracing the challenges of being a man in the modern world.
One source talks about the need for a masculine code of honor. What does that mean exactly?
It's a powerful concept. It's about men holding themselves to a higher standard, living with integrity, being accountable for their actions, treating others, especially women, with respect. It's about, being the kind of man that others can look up to and rely on.
Like being a man of your word, a man of principle, a man who does what's right, even when it's hard.
Exactly. And that source goes on to say that this code of honor should also guide men's interactions with women. It's about treating women with respect,
Okay.
but also about expecting a certain level of respect in return.
So it's about creating a dynamic of like mutual respect and understanding.
Right.
Recognizing that both men and women have, valuable roles to play in society.
Right. It's about recognizing the inherent differences between the sexes and celebrating those differences, rather than trying to, erase them.
It's fascinating how all the themes we've been discussing, fatherhood, education, relationships, friendships, leadership, self-improvement, they all seem to fit together like pieces of a puzzle.
They do, don't they? It's like each piece builds upon the other, creating a more complete picture of what it means to be a man in the 21st century.
And it's a picture that's, far more nuanced and complex than those stereotypes that we often see portrayed in the media.
Absolutely. It's not about conforming to a single rigid definition of masculinity. It's about embracing the full spectrum of, what it means to be a man, with all its strengths and challenges and contradictions.
It's about being the best man you can be, for yourself, for the people you love, and for the world around you.
Well said. And, at the end of this deep dive, it seems like you've really grappled with some challenging questions. You've explored those historical examples, analyzed those societal trends, examined those biological factors. You've clearly put a lot of thought into this.
It's been a journey, for sure.
It has.
And it's clear that you're committed to understanding the challenges men face today and figuring out how to navigate a world that's changing so rapidly. This deep dive has offered a lot of different perspectives on that whole crisis of modern masculinity and some potential solutions, but it's really just the beginning,
It is. These sources have given you a solid foundation to build upon. Now it's up to you to continue exploring these ideas, challenging those assumptions, and forming your own conclusions. And most importantly, take action. Don't just be a passive observer, be an active participant in shaping your own life and the future of masculinity.
Absolutely. And remember, this conversation doesn't end here. There's so much more to learn and discover. If you're looking to delve even deeper, we noticed that this book is available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. That might be a great next step in your exploration.
Keep learning, keep growing, and keep fighting for what you believe in. The world needs strong, principled men now more than ever.
That's it for this deep dive. Until next time, keep asking questions and keep seeking truth.